very glad to be here and glad you're watching us. My name is Bob Mover, and I'd like to welcome you to my podcast on the real side. Today, we have a very distinguished pair of guests, I would say. Um, and I'm going to tell you a little story to start with, which I think you may find amusing. But first, let me remind you, because it is important that hopefully you'll like what we do here, and you'll be you'll give us a like and subscribe at the end of or the show, or even in the middle. You can subscribe anytime you want. But I sometimes forget to do that, to remind people to do that, and it's more important, I'm told, than I thought it was. But it keeps us going. And, we don't do this to get rich, if you haven't figured that out. But, we're trying to sustain. Anyway, back to what's really going on here. The name Jay Thomas is a name that I've heard for years. Many of my friends knew him. I'd heard about him from the guys that hung out at Smalls. And even in the 70s, I heard his name. And it's really strange because it's sort of like me, too. A lot of people said, oh, I've heard the name and this and that. But, Jay and I didn't really run into each other, though we had many, many mutual friends, which you'll find out tonight as we talk. I found that out when Jay and I just talked the other day. We went through some we had a lovely conversation, and I've taken some notes here that are copious, because Jay's got so many stories, and he's even written books about his life. And I hope you have a copy to show us. I know your dad will. We'll take a look at that later. But this is his book, yes. And I'm also a budding author now, and I'm kind of writing my memoirs as well. So, that's another thing that we have in common. And the more Jay and I talked the other day, it was like meeting your long-lost twin brother, that you were like, oh, you knew so-and-so. Oh, yeah, I knew him too, and blah, blah, blah. And then we'd say, oh, yeah, did you do that? Oh, yeah, and so as you'll see today, there's a lot of that going on. But what you might call parallel realities. But how we became acquainted is very interesting. And this is what I want to tell you. I got an email a couple of weeks ago, and it was very supportive. It was like, do you know, Bob, I enjoy your podcast. I've been watching that and things like that. And do you know of Jay Thomas? Have you heard of him? Because Jay is in the Seattle area, and he's a lot like you. You guys are both in your, early 70s, and, you same generation. You've had a lot of the same experiences. You're both very inspiring to younger people. You mentor a lot of people and this and that. And I said, this is a beautiful letter. And the guy is like, Jay, and he had the same name. It was Marvin Thomas. So I called Marvin and I said, yes, I would like very much to get in touch with Jay. And by the way, I think it's wonderful that you're so dedicated to your father. To see a son committed to getting his father's legacy, his name out there in public. I said, my kids are very supportive of me too. But, it's lovely to see that going on. And then Marvin said, because I assumed Marvin Thomas was the name of the son. And he said, well, thank you, but you got one thing not quite right. I said, what's that? He said, well, I'm not his son. I'm his father. And I said, oh.
And still alive.
And you're still alive. And I said, well, gee, Mr. Thomas, Jay is definitely in his, 70s, I think, because we're about the same age. You must be at least 90 or 85. You must be in your late 80s. I'm not that great at calculating. He says, I'm 96 years young. And I thought we talked for a good half an hour, 40 minutes on the phone. And I really thought I was speaking to somebody 45 years old or somewhere. I just chose 45 as a number. But anyway, on your side of the screen here, This is Mr. Marvin Thomas. And on the right is, Charlie Chan says, number one son.
That's right. That's right. I'm the only one left.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There were others.
My two brothers passed in the last 5 years.
Oh, that's very
Yeah, it was kind of tragic in a way.
So there were three boys.
Yeah, we had three growing up, and I was the only one that got into music. My brother that was closest to me played drums for a minute, but didn't catch on. He liked Frank Zappa. He liked Mothers of Invention.
Invention and that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
But what did he do for a career? I'm just curious.
Well, he was totally straight, just totally straight. He was an accountant. And my other brother was a fisherman up in Bering Sea. And he was on one, just like the most dangerous, living, those kinds of things. He did all that stuff. And he made so much money with king crabbing, it really ruined him. But
really, where's the Bering Sea? Where is the Bering Sea?
That's up on the top of the world. That's like really the roughest and coldest area, and it's I don't know, in the Arctic, somewhere.
Arctic.
Yeah.
And what ruined him? He made so much money that he could
Made so much money, like, and just like what? You go out for like, can you imagine? It'd be like touring with Kenny G or something. He'd go out for like a month and come back with like $400,000 and stuff like that. Just unbelievable.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
Well, I think what Bob is wondering, what was the problem, and he had too much money and he spent it unwisely, and so.
Well, yeah, I mean, after when you make that kind of money, and if you burn through it, and you don't have that kind of job anymore, you're not going to be so happy, just down at the cement plant or something like that. You're going to be going, what?
Yeah.
So anyway, that's a different subject, but yeah.
Well, we've all had. I mean, I know you and I had our experiences with this self-destructive aspect of our personalities. Which is a part of a lot of the cats that we talk to. Of course, in music, it kind of came with the territory, and some of the greatest people we knew were had their indulgences, and not everybody came through.
Well, they were all following Charlie Parker, weren't they, at one time?
Well, to some extent, I think he had something definitely, to do with that. There was, and I guess in that era, it was, well, it wasn't that expensive for one thing,
Yeah, it's really, it comes down to exposure, because they know that, like, if you're exposed to stuff a lot, and you look around and you want to do like other people, like some of my local heroes, there was a couple trumpet players that I loved, and they were both dope fiends, and one guy played organ just like crazy. I remember when Sal was in town, he went out and sat in with Sarge. The guy's name was Sarge, and he played trumpet beautifully. Like guys like Hampton Hawes and stuff were going, why are you here? Why aren't you, someplace where you can be famous? And the other guy was a guy named Mark Doubleday, and he played with, like his commercial gigs were like Paul Butterfield and, bands like that, Electric Flag and things like that. But he knew all the Horace Silver stuff and could get through standards just beautifully, and I love those guys, and people would go, that darn Mark Doubleday's on the dope. I'm thinking, well, can't be that bad. I mean, look at Mark. He's just like my hero or something. I remember when I was in New York in '69 and reading the Village Voice, and there would be like you know, these bands down at the, you know, some rehearsal place, and Mark Doubleday standing there, and I went, oh yeah, he's so cool. But it wasn't really that. For me, it was like Spanish Harlem. You know, in 1969, living there, it's just everywhere. And like I was telling my story, I was, you know, I got out of the draft. I said I was a gay dope addict, you know, and
That's a great story.
you know, that was how I got out. And it
Wasn't
was
that
just
the very first time that you tried junk? Was like actually you decided to get some to be, you took method acting to another level?
almost. The one night, it was a rainy night, and this guy, Johnny Cruz, and some other guy who was an older guy on the neighborhood, they knocked on my door, and they were soaking wet, and they came in and they said, I was really against it, but I had no real boundaries in my existence. I had no boundaries. So they came in and they go, Jay, we're going to get you high. And I immediately got real nervous. And they said, don't relax. This is just going to relax you. That's it, you know. And well, they got me high, and then we played. I had a piccolo in the place, and I played the piccolo, and they played the, you know, the drums and stuff, and they were singing and what have you. And they asked me, I was just totally loaded. And they said, are you high? And I said, no. And that was my standard answer for 19 years. You know? But yeah, I like your stories of being around those guys like Kenny Dorham, and I loved Kenny Dorham, and I knew Woody Shaw a little bit.
Yeah, I knew Woody pretty well. He used to knock on my window when we go out to jam. He would.
Yeah.
He knocked on my window for many reasons, but I think also.
Yeah, he was nice to me. I liked him.
But he was a nice cat. You know, the thing was that I think you had to decide, and then sometimes it blurred the line. Like a friend of mine said to somebody once, well, you know, you got to decide, are you a musician who takes drugs, or are you a druggie who plays music? And I said, man, it's not that clear cut. Because there were a lot of cats who, you know what I mean? It was like they were both. It wasn't like you were. Now, I have seen it go the other way, where, you know, there are a lot of jive cats out there that are really just people, posers, who, you know, like pretending, kind of not real musicians, but real addicts.
Right.
And, you know, that's where I always like that. There's a Steely Dan tune called Deacon Blues.
Right.
And it's sort of about a wannabe like that, you know, and that lyric I really like. What is it?
Pete Chrisley is my buddy.
Yeah, he's on that, and
He plays on it.
Yeah, and then but the lyric is like, what is it? I got a place in the winners of the world. Drink Scotch whiskey all night long and die behind the wheel. But there's another thing. Learn to work the saxophone. I play just what I feel. Drink Scotch whiskey all night long and die behind the wheel. They got a name for the winners of this world. I want a name when I lose.
There you go. I mean, there's a certain thing with the lyrical loser, and it's a mythology, really. And
yeah, and we buy into that. There's that romantic side of it, and I mean, it's partially, you know, it's an image that we can easily fall into. And you know, the thing is that it's like, I remember I was talking with Tom Harrell once, and we were talking about the idea of like you start to get into a certain persona to keep the squares away or something, you know, and so you become a certain person that will kind of put a little block between you and the world. And, you know, at first, you know, it's an act. You're sitting here and with your friends, you're different and this and that, but as far as the world is concerned, you're cool and you're this and that. But after a while, you start to believe your own act. And then
Well, yeah, but they say fake it till you make it. Well, it can work both ways, right? But you know, I think, like getting back earlier, what you said, I think that a lot of the musicians I meet now are diagnosed these days with that attention deficit, whatever. They have a certain thing where they just like really get focused on something, and maybe there's also a negative side. And I know I had it because I remember I had a hard time really just hanging out. You know what I mean? It was it wasn't easy for me all the time in certain circumstances. Like I'd be on on a break at a gig. I remember upstate New York when I first got on this band called the Albert, and on the break, I didn't know what to do with myself, and I was horrible at just making any decent conversation, and I just sit there and stare off into space, feeling vaguely uncomfortable. And so, you know, that's one of the things that is kind of a pastime, and also, you know, something like that is so all encompassing. It's kind of like a problem consolidation plan. You know, I mean, when I get that problem taken care of, all the other ones are fine. And nobody cares about making conversation with somebody that's on the nod, you know. And so that was kind of, you know, I at first was kind of on the case for doing kind of the right thing. My dad helped me a lot. We kind of worked in tandem together until I kind of parted ways. Like I had a full scholarship to Berklee School of Music. I went one day, you know. Yeah, one day I was in there and I looked around and I went, this is a factory. You know, I'm going to go, I'm like, you know, they're talking about like, yeah, you guys are going to listen to music. And I'm going, well, I already do that, you know, 10 hours a day. And they don't need to tell me that. And then some guy in a weird brown suit is out there making some joke and everybody laughs. And I just felt out of step, really. And I stopped immediately. And I remember the guy told me, he said, you know, I know you can do it on your own, but it's going to be maybe harder. And I think he was right, because I bounced around.
Well, I think the strange part is that you enjoyed and benefited from the summer program that you.
I loved the summer program, was great. Yeah.
Well, the thing about Berklee, I taught there for 3 semesters. At a certain point, when I was about 28, I'd been really intensely living in New York. I was having a ball. My life was, I was playing all the time. I had steady gigs. I had my own band, Sweet Basil. And I was enjoying myself, maybe like your brother that made $1 million. I wasn't making $1 million, but I might have been, from the way I was enjoying life, that after the gig each night, my hangs, they were legendary, man. I'd have Tommy Turrentine and Llahngaelhyn, then all the cats over the house if I wasn't having a woman. It was like that kind of a life. And all the craziest, wildest Albert Daly, you know, people you could hang out with.
Right.
Absolutely educational. I was learning all the time. I mean, it was wonderful. But I had a feeling that I might not make it to 30 if I would keep living like that. So I said, I'll take a year or two. And I met a girl who didn't really like New York. She was from Florida and she was young. So we said, well, we go up to Boston. So I got a gig teaching at Berklee for 3 semesters, is what it happened. Because the only reason that I lasted 3 semesters only was at the end of my 2nd semester, Chet Baker called me and he said, so Bob, you're teaching at Berklee? I said, yeah. He said, don't you think you're kind of young to be out to pasture? And then he told me he had a tour of Europe coming up, and we'd just go, the 2 of us, and play with rhythm sections and barnstorm Europe together, and then there I went back into the life. But what I was going to say about Berklee, the good thing about it was that no matter what you were into, if you were into African thumb piano, you're going to meet somebody else there that's into that.
Sure.
You know,
That's it.
and that was really the one real good thing about it, you know, and there was a whole generation of cats that ended up in New York that were my students at Berklee, you know, that were funny. You had all these cats, Wallace Roney and the Marsalis, not Winton, but Branford Marsalis and Greg Osby and Jeff Watts and Dave Kikoski.
Right. So
and all
great,
these really
great people.
Moore, all these cats.
I know.
So I would jam with the students more than, you know, that was like, you know, wonderful. I would hang with them and do that. And then my life changed again. But I could see that it's more environmental. I mean, somebody told me once that the only people he really learned anything from at Berklee, though there were a couple of good people up there, you know, he learned something from me. He learned something from Jimmy Mosher. He learned something from Herb Pomeroy. And he learned something from Phil Wilson. And that was pretty much it. And, but, you know, well, you know, let's get into your background a little bit, because, I mean, your dad is not your average, let me just say, you're not your average guy in any way, but you actually ran a jazz club, among other things that you did, right, Marvin?
That is true. Yeah, we had it for about 3 years, and we had quite a list of all the famous guys came in. We were 4 nights a week with famous big names, and then the rest of the time
Parnell.
Huh?
Parnell's was the name of the club?
Parnell's, yeah.
Tell
We
me more
had,
about that.
you know, everybody that you would recognize from Dizzy on down. We had some...
Cedars Band.
Huh?
Cedars Band played there a lot.
Yeah.
Dino's, I'm sorry. Whose band?
Cedar Walton.
Oh, Cedar Walton, Cedar's Bell,
Yeah.
yeah.
With Bob Berg, but he also accompanied many of the singers that came up from LA.
Cedar did.
It would be Cedar. And we had Zoot. Zoot called us, and but a lot of them were just from promoters, you know, calling us. And
Sal Mystico.
Well, how old were you, Jay, when your dad had this club? Were you?
I was 31 or so, 31 or 32, and for me it was great. I got to, you know, I'd be down there in the afternoon and I'd watch the bands come in, and a lot of times they'd have a rehearsal or a sound check and a rehearsal.
Well,
and
you were already playing pretty well at that point, right? I mean,
yeah, I was playing, and I had already done, you know, some things, and so it was an eye opener. A lot of these bands, how great they were. I mean, I remember being so impressed with Jimmy Heath, the way he ran his band. I mean, Jesus,
yeah,
the Heath brothers. When he came down there, and Jimmy Heath is going, no, he go over and play the piano. This is what I want, and I went, oh wow, you know, this guy is so good, you know, and he was amazing, and I loved hanging out with Sal. I'd take him to the Italian restaurant that we had in town, and we just hung out like crazy and had a good time. I'd go down and sit in. Chet came and stayed at my house, and I had a gay old time with him. Jesus, I tell you. But we had one, you know, a lot of fun. Slim Gaillard was there. He was
some of the bands that came through, like had just released a record, and they weren't traveling as the quintet of the record, say like Cablevision. So Jay popped in.
Carter Jefferson lived in Seattle, and he lived in Seattle. Yeah, and Carter and I played with George Cables, and so when he's touring that record, Cablevision, that was good.
Yeah,
you guys did that together, you and Carter, and
yeah, we played a week, and then Ralph Penland's band with all these guys, Tony Dumas and all those guys. We had I played with them, and who's the other guy? Charles McPherson came through, and he had an album with Tom Harold, and Tom wasn't with him. I got to work with Harold Land because, well, what was it? Oh God, come on now, Jay. Had that band. He had that record called Mackenzie, who was, and Blue Mitchell was on trumpet, and Blue Mitchell died. So he came to the club, and he had those charts, and.
So you would often play with people that played at the club. You would.
Yeah, if they had I mean, it just turned out that sometimes they were just going by themselves, but they had a two horn thing that they were promoting, and so.
Well, you know, for those people, there'll be one moment here to introduce you that way, that a lot of people might not know what Jay plays. And one of the things one great thing about Jay is that he's one of the real multi-instrumentalists, one of the true cats that actually is you know, more than adept on trumpet, saxophone, and flute. And this is something that he's actually made his reputation doing. And Jay has a lot of records out too. I was amazed looking at your discography, you know, how many times and how many places and how many cats you've recorded with. And once again, we're from the generation that if you weren't on a major label, you could make 200 records and nobody was going to hear them.
Right. Right.
Play them on a couple of radio stations, but you didn't really get, you know, the kind of exposure that was given to people with labels and with agents that would call your clubs and get you gigs. You know, it was
Right.
Being your own agent. I did that for a long time because that was the only way to keep playing jazz and keep my kids from screaming for milk. Was you know, but agents were they'd say, well, I can't really sell you. You know, I mean, you're the wrong color, you're the wrong age, you're the wrong this. You know, you
right.
know you're playing.
Well, I know. Yeah, for me, the first one was that did something was Cedar, and my dad had hired Cedar a number of times, so he was pretty tight with Cedar. So when I cleaned up, my dad says to me, he goes, how would you like to record with Cedar Walton? And I'd already met Billy Higgins, and he was kind of like, you know, my recovery big brother or something. He was just really great that way. And I went, you know, about half a second, I went, yeah, that would be great. And so when Cedar was in town, I recorded with them for a couple of days, and it just sat around. But then when Cedar was on the road and he was down in L.A., I think he still had an apartment in New York, but he was in L.A., and they were on the road, and David Williams said, you know, they put the CD on, and they went, shit, that sounds okay. And so
Cedar record, I was listening to some of it, and that's Secret Love and some of those things. It's really.
I think I'm better now, but whatever. So it was good because this guy Albert Marks, who had this record company called Discovery, and he used to have a bigger label that had Sarah Vaughan and all these people. I can't remember what it was before, but he was.
I think he had Music Craft.
And he was like a real big. Garment air guy. He also recorded Benny Goodman. He just ran a microphone in like Carnegie Hall and did a thing. Kind of reminds me of the guy that had Stash Records. That's another one. So my first one was on Discovery, and then he liked the way my wife sang, so we did one. All originals, wrong, you know, all originals and strange stuff. And then Albert died. And so that was the end of that. And then the next one was Stash Records, this guy, Bernie Brightman in New York. And he put out these records from broadcasts, like just free broadcasts. I don't know how he did that. The other one was in England. What was it? Hep Records. So these are all like almost non-labels, you know, in a certain sense. They didn't really help me, but I got some airplay. I got airplay, and that was pretty good in those days.
Oh yeah, no, that was you know, always good to get. I mean,
yeah, I mean, I didn't really sell anything, and then my dad, we put together from our Slim Gaillard connection, we have Mick Vowdy records, and so we've done a few of those. Those are pretty fun, and I can actually sell those off the bandstand, and we do a little better than the other ones. There was another one. What was it? A Canadian guy who got arrested for some kind of perversion. I don't know, psychiatrist who had this thing, and I did. That was through Jessica Williams. Did you never know her?
no, I know her name, but I mean,
Yeah, she was a real good piano player. I loved playing with her. She was, I think she was, it's like that movie, she's transgender, something. I thought she was just, you know, she told, maybe intersex, I don't know, something like that. But she could really play. She could play like, you know, McCoy or something. She could really channel that. And she also was one of the real great practitioners of Monk. And I love.
is she still with us?
No, she died maybe a year and a half ago. Was a year older than me. She died during the pandemic.
Oh.
She also really beat herself up with early on with drinking, and she always smoked, always too, just constantly. In fact, she had like a party trick. She'd play the piano all the way up to the top of the piano and arpeggio, and then grab a cigarette and light it. It's just like unbelievable stuff. So that was fun. I did a record with her and Dick Burke. Did you know Dick Burke?
I know who he was, the big drummer.
He's great. He was the fastest fat guy I've ever seen. I mean, this guy could really move. And I met him, then he was up here at Chuck Israel's, and he had the best stories. But it was kind of sad, because when I was hanging out with Dick Burke and Chuck Israel's, and we're talking, then we're done, and it took three of us to get Dick Burke out of the couch. It's just like, oh my God.
Big. I know he was like 400 pounds almost.
Oh, Jesus, it was impossible, you know.
Yeah, Chet told me he was huge, because he was on the first, some of Chet Baker's early things.
He was on a lot of things. He played with Billie Holiday and all kinds of people.
Yeah, and Mike Wolf is a good friend.
Yes, they had a band. That was a TV band. Arsenio Hall.
Was he in Arsenio's?
He was the band leader. He was the band leader.
Mike was the band leader, but
Mike was? I thought well, okay.
I don't know. It could be.
I don't know, really. I never watched it,
but I know about you know, Dick Burke was legendary, and you know, it was interesting because he was a very light drummer. I mean, he played great, and he could play. One of the few people. The thing that I remember when I did hear him was that he could play quietly with intensity, which a lot of drummers don't do. And you know, he wasn't a, you know, you take a guy that big, Eddie Moore, you know, was more like
Eddie Moore on a tour.
Well, Eddie played like a big guy.
Eddie Moore was great. I loved him.
But he, you know, he played. You knew that there was some weight behind Eddie Moore. Dick Burke was funny because to me he played like a very light kind of
right
for a very big fellow. You know, that was always kind of interesting to me.
Right. Yeah. He was amazing. he put out a couple records, and he had, you know, there was a good young tenor player from Portland. I don't know what happened to him, but anyway, but yeah, I mean, that's a lesser known person, but there's so many people like that out there. And but at first I had some things I was trying to get, you know, I had more ambition about, you know, getting out there and stuff, but now I think it would have been better for me to be in a different place, really. Seattle is not a hotbed to work out of. You're not going to tour out of Seattle that easily. I've been fortunate. I had a couple of things, like through what's his name, Bud Shank, for instance. When Conti died, and I went out on the road with those guys instead of, because Conti wasn't there.
Conti Candoli were referring to.
Yeah.
And so you were in did you stay in Los Angeles for a while? Because you mentioned Pete Christie.
No, just here. But I went down there once and had a gig with, there was a guy named Bob Mays. I was a friend of his from San Francisco, and Roy McCurdy. In fact, this will be fun. I've got a gig coming up with Roy McCurdy in March. And he's but buff. Roy McCurdy can play great, and he's...
I played with Roy. I was in Los Angeles about 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah.
And I'd never played with Roy McCurdy, and he was one of my heroes.
Right.
I'm sure that there's one of the clubs, I can't remember her name, she does a radio show too down there, and she's a very nice woman, and she books this club, and she got me Roy McCurdy, and I was so happy I got to meet him, and we hung out one night together and had a beautiful time. He's such a great drummer. I loved him. And I heard he lost his house in this terrible fire.
Yeah, he lost his house. Yeah, that's
a place to go, because I think I even saw a thing on Facebook that he and his wife were looking for a place to go, and they're in there. I think they must be 80 at least. I think he's got to be in his early 80s.
Maybe mid 80s. I don't know.
Yeah, early to mid 80s. I know.
Yeah.
He's 7 years older than me.
Yeah, I know.
What a great drummer. I mean, for those who don't know Roy McCurdy, I guess his most famous gig was really with Cannonball.
Right.
Sonny Rollins with Roy McCurdy. He's on the Sonny Meets Hawk record, but he's also on this Sonny Rollins Now's the Time, where Sonny plays jazz standards. And there's a version of 4 that Sonny plays on with it's Ron Carter and Roy McCurdy, and it's just a masterpiece. One of my favorite.
I love that album. Now's the Time.
Yeah, and a considerable amount of that. There's different bands on different tracks, sometimes, but
right.
With Roy McCurdy.
Herbie was on part of it. On Now's the Time, Herbie plays on it.
Yeah, and Afternoon in Paris, I think he plays on that. But
right.
But I just remembered the highlight of the record for me was the 4 with Roy McCurdy, because he just was really so understanding of Sonny's rhythmic thing. Also, that was a strange band with Paul Bley and Henry Grimes and Roy McCurdy and Sonny and Hawk, which is
that's a weird one, right? Just wow.
Yeah, that's but there's a solo that Paul Bley plays on All the Things You Are, and Paul I got to know pretty well. He was my daughter Emily's godfather. She has 2 godfathers. He was one of the 2, and Mike Brecker and I used to do a lot of practicing together, and we were really fascinated by Bley's solo on All the Things You Are, the way he takes it out and yet stays inside. He's still playing All the Things You Are. And as well as I got to know him, I'd ask him, what were you doing? How'd you do that? He'd never answer, of course. He never told me.
Right.
But maybe he didn't know. I said, you know what? No, but he knew. He was very educated. But, whatever he was doing, he didn't want to tell you. But still, it was beautiful. But there are some very, very strange moments on that record, that...
I know. It's really weird. the difference between, I know he was really into Coleman Hawkins, but on that, the phrasing is so different.
Yeah, well, I asked Sonny I became pretty good friends with Sonny, quite close to him at a certain point. And one day I was feeling kind of bold, so I said, Sonny, that record with Hawk, what was that like? How did you, and Sonny says, well, this weather we've been having lately, Bob, what do you think about that?
Yeah, that's his voice, all right. Yeah. Now we're gonna play. I love his voice.
Yeah, he just went to the weather. He didn't want to talk about it because I was intrigued with his solo on Lover Man because he gets way up in the harmony. He does really I mean, I shouldn't say this. Well, I can say it. One time I took some mescaline, and that solo made perfect sense to me behind that.
I like one of my favorite Sonny albums is Sonny Rollins and the Big Brass. It's called.
Oh, that's beautiful. Sure.
And when he plays on Who Cares? Oh my God!
Yeah,
it's like
they
do it like just this tempo, and then all of a sudden, and he comes in roaring, and
there's a simple thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, I mean it's
really great.
That was and also the only other soloist on it is a guitar player named Jay Thomas, which looks like Thomas, but it's
Nat Adderley also plays a solo.
That's right, he does play
on one
Grand
cut.
Grand Street.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah. So, that album with the tubas and all that stuff, and there were some guys that didn't get it at first, and after that album, some of those real main bad guys went, oh, what? Because Sonny was just on fire.
Yeah, that whole period of Sonny. I mean, I'd say he always did interesting things. I would say, up to it. Well, I mean, in let's say the 50s and 60s, all of everything is stretching out of the music, it's stretching away from things, and
right.
Always adventurous. And then I'm not a jazz critic, so I don't have anything to say. I mean, somebody plays like that, I don't know. I wouldn't say anything positive. I mean, anything negative about him. I love Sonny.
Right.
He's trying to do. I didn't always get it, but but still, there was. I talked to Percy Heath one time. I was talking to Percy, and Percy said something very telling. He said, for him, the greatest saxophone playing that he'd ever heard, and he said, and this includes Charlie Parker, which I thought was interesting. He said, was Sonny Rollins in 1957. And that's what Percy said to me. He said that for him, nobody ever did,
Oh, yeah.
Sonny was playing in 1957, and I mean, I would go straight through to a few years after that and everything. That, I mean, we all have our primes, I guess, and but I think there's different things that we do in different stages of life.
Right.
I mean, in some ways, I mean, I have emphysema now, COPD, and, I can't play 30 choruses of Cherokee anymore, and maybe I should have, but
that's good. That might be good.
Yeah, I know. That's right. Yeah.
I'm listening to some of these cuts when Jay and Smolian are together. They're going 15, 16, 18 minutes long. Tap, 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 tap. That's too much, I think.
Yeah, sometimes it is, I think.
That's overload.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I think, you can say it in a couple of choruses, and, so I think that, but now I want to say, Marvin, when Jay was small, Jay and I were talking, and he said you were like a baseball dad, like you know, that you had music piped into his room. He said he remembered catches in
Well,
Spain.
that was
You were
maybe
like
a
4 years
short time.
old, and you
Well, we did have records around the house that was good that he could listen to, and art and you know, things that we liked. Art Farmer, for instance. Jesus, what's not to like? And so, like Jay said, it was easy to transcribe those because it, you know, it didn't go too fast and too high, just melodic, and that's what has really, I think, influenced Jay more than anything else. Even though he, you know, he leaves spaces where a lot of people, there's no spaces in their solos, and so yeah, I think just the exposure and the fact that when he just started out, he practiced an hour a day. I mean, and then when he got with other people, and that's was more important than having uh, joined the band in school. When the kids started to hang out together and play together, I think that's what made a certain group of kids here in Seattle really progress.
this was when Jay. You mean when Jay was young, when he was beginning to play, and you're talking about that era when Jay was first getting into playing and that.
Yeah, he was probably he wasn't 13 like you, but he was sort of like 15 and 16, and so he was going. You know, he they did have the big bands, and he got a few little scholarships for like the Reno jazz camps, and where he met people down there, and believe it or not, at one of the high school when he was a junior, uh, the guy put him down in downbeat as instrumentalist, deserving wider recognition. That was
When you were
was
how
it
old?
Heather or
It's just, I was way too young, but
When did they?
it
How
was
old were you when he
weird.
did that? When he said that?
I remember Clifford. They had, my dad got the chart. We had copied it because it was in downbeat, right? And, you know, a lot of this, you see, this is like second generation stuff because my dad, you know, transcribed that solo. The Art
Now your
Farmer.
dad played trumpet. You played trumpet too. That was your main instrument, right, Marvin?
yes, yes.
So yeah, I had that Art Farmer thing in my head. I remember Clifford, the way Art played it.
Right.
And my school band,
Yeah, from the net.
we had the chart
Yes,
that
I remember that. Yeah.
the real chart, the Benny Golson chart. So we go to this festival, and I just got into, you know, and I was like out there in front of the band, really high and grooving,
High
right?
and happy.
And I played high and happy, and I played. I remember Clifford, and oh my God, you know, and when somebody said, "Oh man, you're in this magazine here," I just, oh jeez,
What? I'm sorry.
it was in Downbeat, Leonard
Oh,
Feather.
Sorry.
And I just went, what? That really, it kind of upset me because I didn't have any, I couldn't back that up at all. It was upsetting to me. It wasn't a happy thing. But later on I went, well, it did happen, whatever, for whatever.
Well, I think you got to enjoy that because I'll tell you my own personal story of this. In 1974, I think it was, maybe 75, I placed at the Downbeat poll. I was 22 years old, in talent deserving of wider recognition. And who I tied for, like, you know, number, I don't know, 10th place or something like that was Sonny Stitt and Benny Carter. Yeah. So I thought, wow, I'm nowhere near this. But then, now I can tell you something else about it. In all the ensuing years, I have never again placed in any downbeat poll, readers,
No.
critics, anything, in
Huh.
any capacity.
Right.
Well, you know,
right.
Bob,
Writer recognition, established talent, dishwasher. I have not appeared. I have not. My name has not been. That was the only time I was ever mentioned in a jazz poll. But the one time I was mentioned, and all I said at the time was just like you. I don't deserve this. I certainly don't deserve to be tied with Benny Carter and Sonny Stitt.
Oh.
Of course, I'm wondering how the hell can they be deserving wider recognition? Doesn't the world know who they are? You know, not
Yeah.
that they couldn't win, but
Right, right. I mean, it's kind of silly, but for working and things like that, I can see that it's kind of important. And these days, it's become more and more important for artists to get in that position, because there's kind of like, up here is your star machine, and then right below is like zero. It's just and it's really tough unless you're like being seen at places all the time in the right places and
well,
stuff.
it's very political. And also, one thing that you mentioned, Marvin, that I think that can be brought out about today's world, that's kind of interesting, kind of a drag too, is that I think if I was listening to Prez, and I was thinking that if Lester Young were to walk into a session somewhere, even let's say at Smalls, late at night, and play what he played on I Never Knew, let's say, for instance, something like that, people would say, yeah, this guy plays well, he's good, but it wouldn't be with the feeling of wow.
reverence.
Yeah,
Not the
reverence. Of
Yeah.
reverence. You could you were talking about Gene Ammons and that kind of thing. The fact that he's not, well, Chet put it interestingly. I've told this story before, so I'll tell it very quickly. Just the idea, one night I was like, I'd been practicing my 8-hour days, falling asleep with a horn and like practicing and then working out everything trying to work everything in on the bandstand on our gigs. I was trying to play everything in the kitchen sink. And I'd been practicing with Mike Brecker, so I was trying to play fast like him, and I was trying to, be the best and baddest and blah, 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 and New York competition and all of that stuff. And Chet at first he said to me, would you mind keeping your solos down to maybe only twice as long as mine? And then I didn't. And then the whole set, then finally, by the end of the night, I found something. I found a groove. I cooled it, played reasonable solos, and actually started playing pretty well. But at breakfast, I was like, Chet, I know, I'm sorry, man. It took me so long to calm down. I just get because between sets, he told me I was practicing in the kitchen. He said, in a Boris Karloff voice, he said, Bob, this is not a research laboratory.
Yeah, what a character. Well, Chet was amazing, as you know. I remember when I was in '81 and being in New York and seeing Chet quite a bit, and I was seeing Sal a lot, and I went with Sal to one rehearsal that Chet didn't show for, and it was that great bass player. He used to play clarinet, and then he played.
Irving, was it Irving?
Yes, and
Who was that?
it was the guy from North Texas who played clarinet.
Dennis Irwin.
Yes, Dennis Irwin at his loft.
One of my best friends.
And I had such a good time playing. We said, well, Chet's not here. It was a rehearsal for Chet, so we just played. And I had such a great time. And how great Sal was. Well, Sal was a little terrified and intimidated by Chet sometimes, because Chet, he didn't know what Chet was going to do. You know what I mean? And sometimes playing a background or under somebody is not that easy. And I know, I heard them one night, and Sal said, "Oh man, what key was that? There was a standard, and Chet just started in, and Sal was like, oh my God, I am, he has to be the great Sal Mystico, but at the same time, he's going, what? And so, Chet, that says something about you, that you could, hang with Chet, because his musicianship was astounding.
Thank you. Well, the thing was that I understood we both were really relating to songs,
Right.
being tunesmiths and melody, and I was kind of a singer too. So, I mean, that even though I didn't sing at that time too much, but this feeling, and I love counterpoint. That was the other thing. I played a lot with Konitz, and so I was into the idea of playing counter lines with people, and I didn't approach it the same way as he and Mulligan had approached it. I had a little different approach to it, and Chet would kind of, and I was arrogant enough. I was only 22 when I joined him, and I wasn't intimidated because I was too stupid to be intimidated. Being 22, I was already arrogant, and I had an idea that he was going to learn from me too, because Chet wasn't scary technically until you play with him for a while, and then you realize when he get those little eighth notes going, oh my God, this is amazing. But he wasn't like, I played with Katie and Ira Sullivan, people that had a little more trumpet technique when I first joined Chet, but then I realized it's not about that. He's scary because he always plays exactly what he feels, and he's got a direct line to his feelings. And that's right. Than anything that I can do. I mean, I learned to be humbled quickly. I don't mean that, but I came on the band with a little bit more of an attitude of like, well, he's not that great technically, and also he hadn't been playing for a while, and he's getting himself together and this and that. But then once I was on it for a minute, I realized that it was his band, it was his concept, and I was going to understand his concept, and that's when I became a good side man for him, because I
think that you said it before, but like Chet and Ira and Zoot, when you're talking about playing the feelings, because they're not tied down to the changes like so many other players are. They're
thinking melodically.
Yeah, they're pure melodists, and so, but then, what was interesting, I realized then the way to play with Chet, what I found that I thought was profound, really worked for me, was, I got two choices with Chet, and everywhere in between. But one thing is to be the contrast when Chet's playing very melodically, to give him more of a harmonic, a vertical kind of approach, almost like Coltrane to Miles. Where in the other way was to mirror him, to play like him. When he played melodically, be melodic. Like I always thought that Sonny Rollins did that with Miles. He was actually kind of playing the same concept melodically as Miles, even though Sonny had harmonic, but Miles had a lot of harmony too, of course. But there was that kind of thing where it wasn't a question of playing more notes, but I could just play pure fire. If Chet was very, very cool about things, then sometimes the music needed fire, and I could play that fire. Other times, don't play that fire, keep everything kind of cool. And so there was always, every tune was never always the same. It's not like we're playing this tune, so now I'm going to play it this way, because he would feel different from night to night. So a tune that he might have played very cool the night before, he's feeling now more fire tonight, and you never knew. So I thought that was a wonderful thing that, he kept you on your toes that way, Now, what's funny too, though, is the way cats have concepts. After I played with Chet, I sat in with Art Farmer for the first time. I ended up sitting in a lot with Art over the years and becoming pretty good friends with Art. But, I thought Chet really liked counterpoint and liked to do that. And he liked backgrounds, to play little things behind him, like Sal was talking about. You don't know whether, what you think Chet might like that. Maybe long notes behind his solos. He liked interplay and this and that. So I figured, well, probably so does Art. And boy, was I wrong. I started to play these long notes behind Art the very first time I played with him. And he turned around to me and he said, shut up.
Yeah. Yeah, wow. Yeah, well, I saw Art Farmer at Slugs one time with Jimmy Heath and those guys, and it was amazing. You know how great Art Farmer was. That I saw him also in Seattle, and that was kind of strange. He was real mean to a fill-in piano player. I just went, oh my God! I felt bad for the piano player. They were on this guy's case, and you would think that the guy, he was a local guy who really had a kind of a Bill Evans thing, and they just thought that he would be fine, and oh my God, no.
Oh gosh, yeah, that was.
It was not good. He was touring with Clifford Jordan at the time.
The piano player. Oh,
Yeah, no, Art and Clifford were touring, and they came to Seattle at a place called Jazz Alley. But so, and some of the other people that you mentioned a lot. I did hear Albert Daly play quite a bit early on for me, and he used to come by and get high where I lived, because I didn't care. He'd just come there and get high and sit there and then talk as he was kind of out of it, and so I was just like a little magpie on the fence, just listening to him talk, and it was pretty cool. But his command of the piano was amazing, and he told me about being able to pick a basketball up with one hand. So that was his scholarship, just like whoop, he could.
He was a basketball, right? He was an athlete in high school.
Right.
That he was also going to be a concert pianist. They wanted to make him into the next Andre Watts, to be the next black concert pianist, because he was playing with symphonies and everything by the time when he was a teenager.
Right.
And I said, Albert, what happened? He said, I heard Bud Ball.
Yeah, I mean, he's the one that a lot of people now don't even know about, and he was really great. I thought I remember hearing him play, and a couple of times hearing him play live. I'd never heard anybody sound better.
Yeah, it's true. Me too.
I never heard anybody sound any better.
That's a beautiful way to put it, Jay. That's like Tom Harrell and I would have nights. We had a quintet, my band at Sweet Basil, and it was Dennis often played bass, but we had different people. And Albert had this little trio with Dennis and Adam Nussbaum, who was like 18 at the time, and I would constantly always sit in with those guys. But with one night, I mean, several times we had Albert at Sweet Basil. Sometimes he'd miss the first set, and I'd say, "What happened to you?" He'd say, "Oh, nothing. I just wanted to give you guys a set to get ready for me."
Yeah.
And so we'd say Albert liked to tell the rhythm section to stroll. So I mean, we would be playing something like "The Song Is You," and Albert go, stroll or something like this, and then the rhythm section would see him, and he'd play like 3-4 minutes of solo piano at the tempo, and just give you a whole treat of like piano playing like you never heard in your life.
Right.
And Tom and I would look at each other, because sometimes we gave Albert the first solo, and Tom would not look at each other like, "You want to go next?" I'm not really, without a word, wordlessly look at each other like, "You gonna play after that?" And I don't know. No, one of us would finally do it, but it took guts. And I tell a story that I like that. Marvin probably read it in my book. But one time Albert told me that he made the world's greatest ribs. We were eating ribs, and he said, Albert was not modest about things. He would tell you, "Yeah, well, these ribs are good. We were in a restaurant. These are pretty good. They're quite good, but mine ribs are the best you ever had."
Yeah, he was talking about Coltrane wanted him to join his band first. That's what he told me. He said, he played with them in Baltimore or something, and So,
Yeah, well, I heard that story that actually Train did want him to. Uh, it might have been the band that when Train had sat in with Monk the summer before he died. I think Elvin and Rashid had missed the plane or something. The Coltrane Quartet. The only people that showed up were McCoy and Train. So they gave McCoy a set of solo piano, and Monk's band was playing. And they convinced Train. Ben Riley told me the story. Actually, I'm digressing the story I was going to tell you with Albert, but Ben Riley said that what happened was Train ended up playing a set with Monk's band with Charlie Rouse, and Ben was on drums. And so when Ben got back to New York, he got a phone call from Train and said, "We're going to have a rehearsal. I want to come back inside and play that night with Monk. Made me think. And I think I've been outside like for a while. I'd like to get back in and play some tunes and stuff. And I want to have you in the band." So, Ben said he had Ben, and I think it was Reggie Workman. And I think he mentioned that Albert Daly was supposed to play piano. And Ben said they had a rehearsal scheduled, and he was supposed to go to Train's house, and he did. They said he went, because Ben remembers because it was on his birthday in July 13th. And he went over to Train's house. He said, and Alice opened the door and said, John died a half an hour ago. I tried to call you, but you were already on the way.
oh boy.
So that may have been the band, because Albert said that too. He said he was supposed to be in Train's last group.
Wow.
It turned out to be that. And Albert didn't really lie. He didn't really need to. I never knew Albert to exaggerate. He
Right. Well,
outrageous shit. But so anyway, I'm up here. I'm playing. I went to Albert's house. He was living with his last wife, Jewish lady named Arlene, in Mount Kisco, which is a little bit up Westchester way, and about an hour from the city. There were trains that run, between New York City and Mount Kisco. So I go up to Mount Kisco for Albert's ribs. Now, of course, we're going to play too. So I get up there. I brought my horn, and mainly the ribs take a few hours to really do them right. So he's got the ribs. He's preparing them, and then he's like, "Well, let's play." And then, of course, we had a glass of wine. So Albert, I'll never forget it. He gave me a glass of wine. You like port wine? You like sweet wine, which I don't. But anyway, when in Rome. So and he was drinking his wine from a mason jar. He would just, like his glass of wine looked like you needed to be able to grasp a basketball to put your hands around this mason jar full of wine. And so we played. I mean, our duets were of another sphere. He brought me to places that I didn't know music could go to. And there's a record we did on Xanadu, one of my records called Things Unseen. And there's a duet on Yesterdays, which was Albert's Changes.
I gotta get that. I gotta.
I'll send it to you.
Okay, Things Unseen. I'm gonna get that.
But I think it's the best thing I ever played on a record. There's a few things. Usually I don't like many of them, but this one, because of Albert too, and even the damn piano's out of tune, but it doesn't matter.
Right.
I think they tune it for a record day, but nevertheless, so we're playing our duets, and I'm like hitting like places I've never been. This is an epiphany. This afternoon, we've played a lot of duets, but now we've honed it and we've worked on it for a couple of years, and we've got it where we're psychic with each other. That feeling you've had it with people. I know the way you play.
Right.
So here we are, and then the phone rings, and it's my roommate in New York, and they didn't have answering machines then. But, I mean, they had them, but we didn't have one yet. And he said, he just got a call from Hot O'Brien, and he's got a gig tonight at Gregory's with Wilbur Little, and he wants you to come down, and he wants you to play with them tonight. The gig starts at 8 or something like that. And it's like, it's 4, and I'm heavily involved with Albert. And I said, well, he said, here's Hod's number. He wants you to call him and confirm. And I'm saying, Al, man, I don't want to go. I love Hod. And we'll talk about that. I know you play with Hod, too. And Hod was a wonderful, wonderful player and a wonderful person. and great. But I said, Albert, I'm just having such a wonderful time. Plus, I want your ribs. I'm smelling the ribs. They're cooking in the oven. And like, we got a couple more duets in us. Maybe Albert, let me call somebody. I'll call someone, and they can go over and do it. Call Carter Jefferson. He was or somebody. And Albert was like all of a sudden Mr. Reliable. He says he called you. Of all the saxophone players in New York, he chose you. It's an honor to be chosen. He's a very fine musician, very fine piano player, and he's your friend. And so you have to go and do this. You have to do it. I said, but Albert, the ribs. He said, and the duets, and the duets. And he's like, nope, you got to go. We're going to do this. We'll play a couple more. Here's the train schedule. And all of a sudden, he's like, we're in the Army. He's got the train schedule there and blah, blah, blah. He says, okay, there's a train now in 20 minutes, and you better we'll get ready. We'll get down the hill. And, of course, we're playing, and I'm trying to get every minute out of it. And then Albert says, oh, damn, train's in like 6 minutes. We better get down the hill. So we lived at the top of this hill. And that's where I knew he was an athlete, because I couldn't. He was heavy at this point. Albert varied in weight, but at this point he was like over a good 240 pounds at least.
Right.
And I had my horn with me, and we looked down the hill, and Albert says, damn, the train is pulling in. It's supposed to leave. Geez, we got 2 minutes to make this train. And I'm like, I can never walk down this. I can't run down this. I can't, then get to the train. Albert says, I got it. And he tears off down the hill like Walter Payton or something, or Jim Brown. He's like an NFL fullback. He's just weighing down the hill, and he catches the train. I'm running, little fat me, with my saxophone case bouncing on the sidewalk, and he actually holds the train to get me on it.
Wow. Yeah. He was, when I know him, it was probably one of his low points, because I was with my guy that I lived with, Steve Hawes, and I remember driving Albert through. He rode with Steve and I up to the Musicians Union, and we were going through areas, and Albert was ducking down.
Is this in Seattle? This is
in New York, in
New York.
And we're wondering what is going on. Albert is like hiding in the car at one point. So we're going, this is not good. This is not a good thing. So there was, maybe he owed somebody, or who knows. He didn't want to be seen. We went through a couple areas, and he was down in the car, and just and it was sad, because how great he was. But the Tom Harrell stuff, when you mentioned Tom Harrell, that I loved the way he plays, and that's when we're talking about AI and stuff. People are going, yeah, AI is so amazing and stuff. No, I don't care about it. But I do care about Tom Harrell, and when I see him play, and I don't know how it's going to go, there's so much drama, and there's so much humanity in that. You know what I mean? You wonder if Tom's going to be the best guy on the planet that night, or maybe he won't be able to play very good.
Yeah, well, that kind of happened to him later. When he was younger, that didn't occur.
Right.
In the 70s, when we knew each other, he was generally. One time I told Tom, because he's very nervous. I said, Tom, the way you feel, the way you act, afraid of everything and this and that, is, you see, I appear to be assured with people, and I'm more of a adept in social situations and this and that. But let me tell you something, Tom. And Tom was best man at one of my weddings. And Tom, I said, the way you feel inside, the way you appear on the outside, I feel like that on the inside. I'm terrified of everything. People, I'm so self-conscious, basically, but I don't show it. But, because, it doesn't seem to do anybody any good if I do that. It works. You know, you can be like that, but I don't know. I just can't let myself be like that. But I mean, I'm exactly how you feel on the inside. I feel that too. So Tom says to me, I know you do. You're, you're my alto ego.
You are. Yeah, I gave him a ride in Seattle. He played at the University of Washington, and that was my one experience with Tom. I picked him up and took him to the rehearsal, and he was playing the rehearsal like it was Carnegie Hall. He just kept playing and stuff. It's a big place, and finally, his wife, what are we doing? You know, let's stop now. You know, and I think I got the best of him that day because he was really on fire. And I said, oh man, you got to go check this thing out. And in the evening, it was a big place and sketchy sound and whatever. And they were going, well, we don't understand. And I'm going, well, if you were there when I was there, because he was unbelievably strong all in the afternoon, and I kind of intuitively knew how to interact with him a little bit. I started asking him about his horn, because all of a sudden he just opened up. He was, oh yeah, Tom Malone did this and this and this and that, and he was real nice and friendly, but everything was really relaxed because I was not staring at him in his face and putting him through any changes, and I just love the way he plays. He's got so much Charlie Parker on the trumpet. It's just incredible, and he can really play all over the instrument. And I have heard some things that are fairly recent that he sounds just fine.
Oh, he sounds just fine quite a bit of the time. But I mean, I've also heard friends, mention that the fact that he had been somewhat erratic in some performances,
Right.
I know Chet loved him too. They loved each other, and sometimes Tom would sit in with us with Chet, and that was a thrill to play with both of those cats because they both
Right.
like Bird. The thing with Tom is it's always like the joke of the man who can make love to 100 women, and then when the performance happened, he was done after 3, and they said, "What happened?" He said, "I don't know. It all went great at dress rehearsal this afternoon."
Yeah, that's right.
Now Chet actually had that kind of thing too. It's interesting psychologically. I've found, like, with large performances, when we had, and this is not entirely consistent, but often Chet was fine at large concerts, and he'd be cool. But other times, when there was a big, important performance that, critics are going to be there, and it's a large festival, and there's 2,000 people in the audience, and this and that, then Chet would play like he didn't care, or he'd need some dope and didn't have it and have to go through the concert in a panic, or he'd have to, various ways that he could get in his own way, he would do. And then the concert would finish, and he'd get straight and he'd say, Bob, there's a little rhythm section playing down at this club in Midtown, or wherever it was. I'm not New York, but in somewhere. He says, there's a piano player I know who's playing there. He's got a trio, and you want to go down there and blow? And so I'd go down, and he'd play like an angel at the jam session after the concert, which was like a mess. And,
Right.
So I'd say, well, I don't bother to figure it out. My friends are who they are. And
he sounded so great at Parnell's, at my dad's club, and he had a lot of control. Chet, he could really he could get on the mic, but he would play so soft that it would be beautiful, and he could play all the way down the very bottom of the horn, and so he could get around down, like low C, middle C, all the way down to F sharp. And
He had that special embouchure where he would do that. Did you ever see where he had that kind of thing? It was like,
I don't know what it was, but he had a real loose. Well, I think loose is good, right? Especially with saxophone. That's what I've learned anyway. It's like,
yeah, but on trumpet,
I tell people now, when I see people and they go like that, I go, no good. Don't tuck.
Yeah, no,
you don't tuck, right? No.
No, you know who showed me embouchure? This is interesting. I met Stan Getz when I was 13, and I had a chance. He was vacationing in Miami. I'd met him one time before, and I went to a concert, and he gave me my first reed and all that. I asked him for a reed. I started playing saxophone the next day, but I asked him. He came to Miami, and a friend said, by the way, he's staying at this hotel not far from here. You want to go over? And of course, he had a photograph. Remember, he remembered me. And so he said, oh, come on up. And I told him I played saxophone. So for 10 days, he sat around the room, his hotel room. He sat for his kids. And he let me play his horn. I'd been playing for like about 3 or 4 months. And he let me practice on his horn. He promised to send me an alto, but he never did. And that was a long story that I go through. But the point is that he showed me about embouchure. He told me about practicing in your head. And he said, there's the secret to the embouchure is this muscle right here. Push it out and put your teeth here and be very relaxed, but just the corner of your mouth. I know this. This is happening. Normal. Then he explained to me the same thing could be done genitally, but he didn't demonstrate.
Yeah, well, I think loose is good. When I see people tucking, I don't think that's good. I thought Dexter and those guys. I always point to the way that they look. They playing on the red generally, and all those guys. Most of them are playing on the red. Hardly anybody tucking. Maybe I think if you're playing maybe a real soft setup, maybe you would tuck. I don't know, something that you need to build resistance somehow. But if you have a little bit of a harder setup, then you want to be looser. But that's.
So you didn't play saxophone till you were about 20, right? You took it up rather late.
Yeah, I discovered I could play one. I just started playing my buddy's saxophone, and I discovered I could play one and get a sound, and it sound just fine. And I went, wow. So I finally got a saxophone. My first saxophone was from some guy. His name was Speedball, and he had this, and somebody says, yes, Speedball's got a saxophone. So I went up into the Central District to Speedball's place, and there was this guy, and he only had no furniture in the joint. And he had an album right by the door. And it was Bobby Blue Bland, and it was Two Steps from the Blues. I'll never forget it. I go in there and I go, whoa. So and he's got this saxophone. It was a tenor, and it was a Reynolds Supertone. And actually, it was pretty good. I took it to a guy who rebuilt it, and I played that. And then my dad's friend, way back, my dad went on a band to New York when he was in high school, and his buddy who went with him on that trip in high school to New York was still his friend. And by this time, he was a junkie, but he had a regular job too, most of the time. And he had a cigar box full of mouthpieces. They were like, these $1,000 auto links and stuff. And so he gave me this whole box of auto link mouthpieces, and I got one that played. And the next thing, I got my Reynolds Supertone, and I'm playing rhythm and blues bands, because I always loved, the three sounds with Stanley Turrentine and that whole kind of thing. And I learned how to get that kind of, dance band, blues kind of thing, going. I was still working on, I was like doing giant steps on the tenor all the time, because when I lived in New York, I transcribed giant steps on trumpet. And that took a little bit of doing, especially on a record player. And I turned a few heads with that because I was taking lessons from Carmine Caruso. And, I was playing, But Not For Me, the Train Changes, and it's in the key of F, and I'm playing high on the trumpet and going through that stuff, and people would look over at me and go, what the hell's going on over here? There's a little party going on over here. Only I was like the guy that knew two songs, Happy Birthday and Giant Steps, I mean, I didn't. But